Welcome in Booty and Baribeau on Gridiron Now. He is Josh Booty and I'm Rachel Baribeau. Josh, I'm ready. I've got my football is my other language shirt on. You can kind of read it here. I mean, come on.
You got to back up. You can see it good. There you go.
I might fall right off this stool if I back up anymore, but football is my other language. I'm ready to talk football with you. I'm excited. Big weekend of football this weekend. There were some other big games, and we'll get into that as the playoff rankings come out for the first time tomorrow night. But your thoughts on this SEC weekend of football?
Well, I guess it all starts with the Florida-Georgia matchup. Everybody in the SEC was waiting to see what Georgia brought to the table. A new quarterback, the Bauta kid. Rick went to him. Schottenheimer felt comfortable with him because they were going to utilize him in the run game, and they thought he was a better athlete than Lambert. And it really kind of backfired on him because that was his first career start against against a very good team in a big situation. And I think it was a little bit big for him because they didn't move the football. They ran him three times, Rachel, three times. And they talked all week about how they were going to use him in the run game. How do you start a kid because he can run, because he can flat out make plays with his feet, and then only rush him three times? The kid wasn't very productive. He threw four picks. A lot of that, is credit to Florida's defense because the Gators are really good on defense.
Josh. How do you now? Our own Mike Huguenin of Gridiron Now broke that news on Thursday night. I tweeted you. We were all going, what? Fatone Bauta is starting. How do you, first of all,
it makes sense.
How do you, I understand that they recognized, or they thought, that Schottenheimer and Rick thought that he would present, the X factor, if you will, against his Florida defense, a mobile quarterback. But the kid's young. He hasn't played in a game. He hasn't started in a game. And it's the world's largest outdoor cocktail party.
I know. How do you throw a kid in it? To his credit, you got to think this kid's never played in a game like that, and to be tossed into the Lions' den against a defense that might be the best in the SEC. They're just very, very good and athletic. And for Georgia to not have Chubb and to not really have that running game going like it did early in the year, to bring this kid in there and expect him to win a ball game like that, I think it's a little bit too far-fetched. And I blame Mark Richt for that. I think, him and Schottenheimer, with the experience that they have, in their back pocket, all the years that he's, handled quarterback situations, had great quarterbacks. Schottenheimer, the same thing, and not being able to be as prepared as they wanted to be going into that game. You got to play Lambert. I don't understand that move unless we would have seen a different attack by Georgia. If they would have run the ball and had Bauer really run the football. Kyler Murray did the same thing this week. He got his first start, but what did he do? He rushed for 138 yards. Someone mixed it up perfectly for him, and it was a great balance and mix. Georgia didn't have any of that going for him, and it looked like Bauer was just way overmatched, and Georgia never got going.
All right, Josh, here's my thought. I was on Sirius XM College Sports Nation with Andy Staples last night, and we were talking about it. And we talked to Seth Emerson of the AJC about the curious case of Mark Richt. Mark Richt is the kindest, most awesome guy in the world. I think he's a good football coach. I think there is a distinction between a Mark Richt and a Nick Saban. Nick Saban will step on your throat and finish a game. Mm-hmm. If it does not go well for Mark Richt in the Kentucky game or the Georgia Tech game or other games at the end of the season and it gets ugly, I don't know if Mark Richt survives the season. Now, Seth Emerson, Josh, said that he thought it was because they've got great recruiting classes coming in, including a great young quarterback prospect. But Schottenheimer, you and I have discussed this more times than not, and we can say this on our podcast because we can say whatever we want. His play calling has been suspect, and that's an understatement this year.
I thought early in the season he was doing a phenomenal job. We saw Lambert completing almost every ball he threw in the first four games, and a lot of that was because of the competition they were playing. And since that Bama game, things really turned bad for that offense. I think Georgia's got a good football team. I don't think they're being coached right now. And Rick is a sinking ship. And I'm like you. I love Mark Richt. I'm one of his biggest fans, have been for years. One of the nicest guys in football and in our whole industry and everything. There's no doubt about it. But I think you're right. There's something missing there in that organization where every year, you mentioned it, every year they get amazing recruits.
Yeah.
Chad Scott yesterday in an article said that Georgia's a top 10 job in the country. I don't know if it's a top 10 job. That's a little bit of a reach, but they do have great tradition. It's a top 25 job. There's no doubt about it. I think they can get a guy in there, a really good coach in there to fire things up. Look what happened at Florida this year with McElwain. There's situations out there that are diamonds in the rough, and this is definitely one of them. I hate to see Mark Richt suffering, and it's a sinking ship right now. And a lot of it is because the Nick Chubb injury and what's developed since that. There's been no running game. There's been no passing game. And a guy like Sonny Michel can't get anything going for the offense because there's nothing else to go with him, to go with it. So now they're battling. Now they're going to have a quarterback battle this week in practice. And it can't happen this late in the season.
Why is there, and that's a crazy thing to me, Josh, why is there a quarterback battle going on this late in the season? I think when you chose to start Fatone Bauta, you basically just cut any kind of confidence out, your heart out of Bryce and Grayson Lambert.
Yeah, they've got some guys that have potential, but none of them have rose to the occasion, and I blame a lot of that on the players too. I know the coaches hadn't really developed a game plan for these guys that had given them, even trying to give them a chance of success, but these kids are flat out not playing good football. I don't know if you can. I need to look at more film because I'd like to look at what the offensive line's doing because these guys, like against Alabama, they got hammered, but they got down early. Alabama can pin their ears back. I know it was early in the season, but we were at that game. Alabama pinned their ears back, and Lambert had no shot. So they've got to be able to counter good defenses. We've seen them play against good defenses now, and they get nothing on offense. So there's something missing there, whether it's offensive line play, an established run game, or a balanced attack. It's not happening there, and we thought that they would be that type of team this year.
Josh, you made a very good point. What I'm hearing from Georgia fans is what's happened with McElwain at Florida has caused them to say, hey, that could happen for us too. Hey, if we have changed. Now, listen, there were guys before McElwain, Josh, and those guys didn't work out. But they're looking at a new guy, fresh blood, that the guys have bought in, and Georgia fans are saying, why not us?
Yeah, it's exciting what's happened at the University of Florida. It really is. We knew they had great players, and everybody says Georgia has great players. Spurrier was quoted a long time ago, hey, Georgia, during the recruiting war, why do they sign all the good players? And when we play them on Saturday the next year, we end up having all the good players. So something's not right there. They're not developing these kids to win championships. They're great young men, but they don't win championships. This college football and everything that we're talking about is geared towards the playoff rankings coming out this week, and all the best teams are going to be showcased, and Georgia's not even in the mix. They're not even in the top 25. To be a university like the University of Georgia or Alabama or Auburn or LSU, these are football schools, football powers, and for them not to be in the top 25, something's wrong. Something's wrong.
Josh, moving on, you mentioned Kyler Murray. Another school at Texas A&M, Kevin Sumlin, has an open quarterback race, a tryout this past week. Kyler Murray, as you mentioned, has a coming out party. I think he was the first debut in which he had 100 yards rushing and 100 yards passing since Cam Newton. And so this got 223 yards to the air, one score, another score on the ground. Certainly a coming out party for this kid.
Yeah, you know what? He reminds me of a little Johnny Manziel. He looks like a little bobblehead doll running out there. I don't know if you saw him in his uniform with the big black helmet, but he's about 5'10", 170, and he's running around like a little bobblehead, and he looks like a little bitty miniature Johnny Manziel. And it's fun to watch. I saw this kid play his sophomore year at Allen High School in North Dallas. Allen was playing South Lake Carroll. They opened up their beautiful stadium there in Allen, $60 million facility. This kid stepped on the field as a sophomore in high school in front of 25,000, 30,000 people and put a butt whipping on South Lake Carroll that day. And I knew this kid had something special because he was making plays just like he did against South Carolina that Friday night in Allen back in 4 years ago. So, this kid can really play. And I know Sumlin likes to have that wrinkle in his offense where he can use the run game, and they look super effective. So Texas A&M, what they do, they got back on track. and now with a new quarterback and the way that Sumlin likes to do things, it's going to be fun to watch them. And you saw how how athletic he was.
Josh, let me ask you this. This is kind of a funny off the wall question. Anytime a quarterback is athletic, since Johnny Manziel, we call them Johnny Manziel like, right?
Yeah.
So
Everybody.
So who was it before?
He is the He is the standard though in our conference. Johnny Manziel. Well, Cam Newton was really the standard.
Okay.
But there's not many Cam Newtons. I mean, Cam Newton is an absolute animal. But Johnny Manziel was so fun to watch. I mean, we turned on the TV every Saturday to see what Johnny football was doing. But this guy's got that type of potential. He's very, very athletic. He's quick. They run that offense like Oregon does and like A&M does, and it's just fun football. It's a fun brand of football to watch. We all love it.
All right. So who was when they said an athletic quarterback in your day? Who did they say? Who was the Johnny Manziel of your day?
The game has changed. It was different. It was Brett Favre. I mean, okay. Brett Favre ran around and made a bunch of plays that were outside the box. Back in my day, that's what? Yeah.
He was a gunslinger.
He was a gunslinger. He was a riverboat gambler. That was the athletic side of what people thought, I guess, or what they labeled quarterbacks back in the 80s and 90s was, he's a riverboat. Archie Manning was like that. He was running around for his life. Before that, you had Fran Tarkenton, guys that would just make plays with their legs outside the pocket. Before Joe Namath got hurt, we can talk about an Alabama quarterback here in Joe Namath. I mean, the guy was spectacular with his feet. He made plays. He wasn't scared to run. He made plays outside the pocket. But, that's going back a few generations. But Brett Favre was the guy that we all looked at as, he took more chances than he should have. But, man, he was the funnest guy in the world to watch.
Yeah, he was. He scared me, though, when he'd go throw back across his body on the run.
Yeah, it cost him a Super Bowl at the Saints NFC Championship down in New Orleans the year Drew Brees and them won. After Katrina and all that happened, Brett Favre they had a real chance to win at Minnesota, and he threw against the grain and lost that ball game and it hurt him. But yeah, I mean, other than some of the crazy mistakes that he did, you can't fault him for trying because he was such a good athlete with a rocket arm.
Absolutely, Josh. I've got to ask you about one more game. I want to talk about one more game, I should say. The Auburn-Ole Miss game. You're high on Ole Miss. You think they're going to be able to win out. You think they're going to go to Atlanta and represent the West. I still think they're going to falter. I think it's going to be Alabama. They're going to find a way back. But Auburn gave them a run for their money for a couple of quarters into the fourth quarter. But Auburn just can't close.
Yeah, Auburn looked better. Ole Miss is a really good football team. For Auburn to move the ball like it did up and down the field, and Ole Miss has a really good defense, showed signs of improvement. And Sean White showed signs of improvement. Had 308 yards passing in a game like that of that magnitude. They had every chance to win in the fourth quarter. We've seen Auburn over the past few weeks drop a lot of footballs, look inefficient on offense. They looked efficient. They looked again like a good team. I know that's your squad, and you were really hoping that they would knock Ole Miss off, but they were right there. And I think that's some things that they have to work out now as the season goes on. They've got a few more games left where they can establish themselves again, help themselves in recruiting, because they're gonna have to recruit good this year to get back on track next year and battle against these teams that are in the SEC West, and that's where Auburn needs to be. They're a wonderful program, and they've got to get themselves back on track. But that was kind of a first step into getting there and playing in a tight game against Ole Miss.
Yeah. It was a great victory for Ole Miss, and the story for Auburn, I think one of the big stories for Auburn was Carl Lawson being back, and Josh, what it looked like to actually have pressure on a quarterback.
He's a difference maker. You said it. I mean, when you got a guy like that can rush the passer, we all know he's a stud pass rusher and a stud defender, stud defensive player. But you're right. If you got a guy like that, it's like what happened at Ole Miss, having Laramie Tunsil back on offense. Is what can you do now? Ole Miss hasn't been able to run the football. What did they do now with him back? They ran the football effectively. They looked like a different offense. They pounded the rock. So that gives them another element, and that's why I think Ole Miss is right there and where they need to be.
All right, Josh, as we close out this podcast, I got to tell you a story. The first ranked...
I love your stories. I love your stories.
Remind me one time on this podcast, and I will tell it because I've told it on satellite radio, about how I sent an email to my ex-boyfriend and somehow sent it to his entire company.
Did that get him in trouble? Did you call him out?
I didn't call him out. It was on a scale of a 1 to 10. It was a 15, and it was a mushy email. And he owned the company, and I accidentally sent it to his entire company.
Was there any dates after that? Nope.
We did stay together after that for a little bit, but that's not the story today. The story is about
you're the fiery Latina. A little spicy.
Spicy, fiery, I love it. So the story today is about the college football playoff and the selection committee, because you're pumped up. You told me I want to talk about my picks for it. A couple of years ago, Bill Hancock, the commissioner, the head of the college football playoff, head of the BCS as well, nicest guy you ever want to meet, took a beating. He was kind of the front guy when everybody was bashing the BCS and happened to be the nicest guy ever. But he came on my radio show in Atlanta, Josh, and I told him, I was openly, asking and sort of begging to be on the college football playoff committee. And he said, Rachel, we'll certainly look at you as a member of the committee, but you can't be an active member of the media. And I was like,
You'd have to quit your day job.
I'd have to quit my day job. So one day when I'm not an active member of the media, I'm going to be voting. I'm going to be in that room, that committee of 12, 13. I think it's 12 now that Pat Hayden had to retire for health reasons. But your thoughts on how it's going to shake out, because I don't know that it's going to go by the AP poll, because the thing is, Josh, they're not supposed to take into effect last year. And if they're not taking into effect last year, does Ohio State make your top 4, Josh Booty?
My top 4, they do not. And I like the chances that they have to jump into the top 4 at the end of the season, but right now I don't have them in there. I really think we got two Big 12 teams in my top 4. We got Baylor and TCU. We've got Clemson, and I've got LSU. Now, LSU goes on the road this week, and the game of the decade in the SEC once again, and Bama's favored by 7. So it's going to be tough road to hoe for LSU, because they got some other games too that are going to be very tough games ahead. Ole Miss on the road as well. But right now, Clemson has showed me everything that I've wanted to see in a team out there on the East Coast. And so I think Clemson's in. Baylor's in. Now, that could change too, because they've got to play TCU, Oklahoma, Kansas State. They've got Kansas State this Thursday night. That'll be a fun matchup to watch, and with a new quarterback. And I think this could all change now. But right now, I have Baylor and TCU as my top 4. And I think that we're going to see some crazy things out of this football playoff stuff tomorrow when it all comes out. Who's your top 4?
You're putting me on the fence. You're putting me on the spot here, not on the fence. And I said to Andy Staples, my partner last night on Sirius, I've got like 10 right now that I can make a case for. But I will say this. I think Alabama is one of the top 4 teams in the country. I also think LSU is too, Josh.
Yeah, I think both of them are well equipped to run, to play against anybody, because they run the football so well and play solid defense. I think the teams, and Ohio State is another one like that. They're built similar, and so I think those teams they can all win against anybody. They can all handle their business, and I think when you've got a team that's that strong in the trenches, and I know you like to talk about the trench play and the offense and defensive lines, but I think that's where you really win football games and really wear people out. If you don't turn the ball over and make mistakes, the offense and defensive line play such a critical part in winning a national championship. And I think the strength of the team, once you get to to the playoffs, has got to be on the offense and defensive lines. We saw it last year. Oregon was not prepared to play Ohio State, and they got steamrolled. And that's what happens later in the years. These offense and defensive line teams that are loaded usually win.
I'm so glad you're my partner, because you're so smart. You talked about big.
I'm just going on what you tell me. The trenches are very important.
No, I like your point on Big 12 football, because you're so right. Their schedules are backloaded. The whole round robin thing they do, one true champion. You got Oklahoma State. I watched a phenomenal game against Texas Tech on Saturday. afternoon between them. I turned off the world's largest cocktail party, and that's saying a lot when I turn off SEC football to turn on Big 12 football. But Oklahoma State, still water strong after that tragedy. Oklahoma with one loss reminds me of Ohio State last year, just getting better, faster, stronger. TCU, Baylor. So Big 12 football is going to be really fun to watch, as well as SEC football down the stretch.
I couldn't agree with you anymore. I think with it being backloaded and all these guys having to play each other, it's going to be fun football. I mean, I'm looking as forward to that as I ever have in my entire life watching Big 12 football. I mean, we've seen Texas and Texas Tech and all these matchups over the years in Oklahoma, but this year with all the offense, it's like you turn on the TV and it's like 73 to 60, 63 to 56. It's like, this is unbelievable. There's no defense being played, but the offenses are so far ahead. It's like, could TCU and Trevon Boykin, could they go and just beat the brains out of Ohio State because they outscore them? I mean, I'd love to see that type of matchup. So we're going to see one team, I think, emerge out of that conference and go to the playoffs. But right now, I've got Baylor and TCU as two of the top 4 teams on paper that I've seen so far. And I hope that Baylor's quarterback, the new quarterback, can keep the ship rolling, because I love to watch Baylor. They've got such an underdog spirit about them. I mean, we've never seen Baylor do anything in football really other than when RG3 won the Heisman. And to have them in the mix with all these other big schools in the state of Texas and little Waco, it's fun to watch.
He is Josh Booty, and I'm Rachel Baribeau. And the next time we join you, we will be talking about the first ever college football playoff rankings of 2015. So make sure to catch the next episode on Gridiron Now. Thanks so much, guys.